So we're going to bring in Dena Morris, who has been in a different part of this world for a long time. Hey, Dena, you're muted. Why don't you unmute yourself there?
Yeah, this will go better if I unmute. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll judge that.
Arguably.
So Dena is the co-lead of our King County and Seattle region pilot program. And Dena comes to this project not only as someone, so when people are watching me being very informal and cutesy with Dena, that's because Dena and I have known each other for many, many years and are good friends. But one of the interesting things about Dena coming into the Seattle pilot very intentionally, as we're just saying with Bobby, is that we wanted people engaged in this work who have a lot of different hats, a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of different backgrounds. So Dena comes into this pilot as basically, the biggest supporter of live music that I know, who has not formally worked in the music industry, has worked as a policymaker or in a lot of different hats that we're going to talk about, but someone who is, has competencies around, again, moving policy, around communications, around strategy, around advocacy, but wants desperately to see music back because it's a big part of your identity and your life. And, maybe just to start, Dena, could you speak a little bit more about that, about sort of your, coming into, you as a music fan and just over the last, as your adulthood, what has music meant to you? I mean, just start with that kind of framing.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Michael. And thanks for inviting me to represent our community today. This is a real honor. As Michael said, we've known each other for many years. My professional life was about 30 years in Washington, D.C., and that's where we, found each other in the advocacy world. I spent some time on K Street as a lobbyist and advocated primarily for public health, but also for local government. And then in the United States Senate as working with policymakers, and then a stint under Tom Frieden, who was Obama's CDC director, running the DC office of the CDC before coming to Seattle. So I've only been in Seattle about 3.5 years, relative newcomer. And was excited, of course, because of the reputation here for live music and the role that that music plays in our civic identity and who we are as a region. So that's been a real honor. And I would just say, taking your question a little bit further, one of the things that's been so delightful here for me in participating in this REVS project is that the city of Seattle has Scott Pasqualic, whose job is to liaison with live music. What's the other word that they use in his title? Nightlife. He's the Nightlife liaison. And then Kate, who I think you all should be familiar with, who works for our county executive and is in charge of the cultural community. So we already have this infrastructure in place that local government already knows and values the role that music and the arts more broadly play in our community and who we are. So that was a really nice thing to step into, feeling like I didn't have to start at the beginning to explain that basic connection. So I'll stop there. That's how I got here and who I'm working with.
Yeah, well, and again, not to repeat myself, but I think it's interesting. One of the again, for those of you who are near the program, I've been really fortunate to work at the intersection of music and public policy for over 20 years. And I think something that isn't as appreciated as it could be, across the music sector is there are a lot of music fans and people who are extraordinarily passionate about music who don't necessarily work in the industry itself. And there's an interesting dynamic that, music fans who, oftentimes want to do what they can do to help, and whatever, that may be given where they work or what their resources are. And, part of the ongoing challenge is how to identify those people and tap into figuring out what can they do to help. And so sometimes when we're thinking about local organizing or activism or advocacy on the federal level, it's interesting to, avoid the pitfall of what sometimes feels like a zero-sum game in the music industry, where it's like one sector who's got certain economic interests or certain things they're trying to accomplish up against another subsector. So it's like performers versus songwriters versus labels versus publishers versus, when instead it's like, okay, there are people at a higher level that are just like, I just want music to work. And how do we bring that together? So when the REVS pilot came together in Seattle, it was really interesting to ask you to be one of the co-leads, again, with Kate Becker from King County and Scott Pulisic from the city to say, okay, you're Switzerland. Like, you don't have the history with these people. You don't have any baggage. There's no, I mean, it's just, in terms of industry segments or bad blood or good, I mean, you're coming in fresh into the community to say, all right, maybe there's some things that you could see from 30,000 feet that maybe people have been in the trenches for a long time may not be able to see. And so it's been interesting to see this sort of county, city, and then sort of synthesis model that have been kind of helping. It's really not a management process, it's really a support process with all the stakeholders in Seattle or in the region. I mean, could you speak a little bit to how, what has been the scale of engagement from Seattle stakeholders in the REVS process and how that's been organized over the last 6 or 7 weeks? It's been really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I will say, I mean, it's a challenge and it's a challenging time, and nobody wants us to be working on the problem that we're working on, but seeing the response from the community has really been fun. And I just want to touch on one infrastructure issue before I respond to the real question, which is that it's kind of interesting because, the city of Seattle is part of King County. And they decided at one point to share the public health department. So we literally have one health department that works for both the city and the county. And so that's been a really important and interesting part, I think, of our conversation here regionally, is that public health has been engaged from the get-go. And they've been very responsive and are very involved. And the other thing that's been sort of interesting and helpful from that perspective is that Kate has been really involved in working directly with the governor's office so that the governor's guidance is incorporated into our conversations at REVS. Scott has been very involved with the alcohol licensing board. And so some of the very specific issues that have come up about what can we and can't we do. So we have liaisons, and then that has turned out to be true also of the broader community that we've engaged. And when I said, in my initial response, it's been really fun, I think what I'm speaking to is that we've got this really strong reaction from independent live music venue owners, but also from booking agents, from musicians, from restaurants that have, a little piece of music in the background, and the public health community. And there's just been this really strong and diverse set of stakeholders that have come together. I think at our first meeting, we had 45 to 50 participants. So it was a really healthy and as I said, diverse group of stakeholders. Since then, obviously, participation has varied, but it's been somewhere between 15 and 40 at each of our 6 meetings that we've held so far. We do a weekly meeting, so people already have it on their schedule. And I think you said something that was really interesting, Michael, that this isn't meant to be a management process, it's a support process. And so I think that's really been the guiding kind of our North Star, is to figure out how can we create a platform that allows these stakeholders to come together and to look at this challenge from a lot of different perspectives. In fact, the meeting that we just had this week, there was just as an example, there was a really interesting conversation where someone began to explore the limitations, but also the promise of live stream and how far can it go and what can we do. And almost immediately, a different stakeholder spoke up and said, look, we have legal challenges with that from a label perspective, but also there, you mentioned it earlier, video fatigue is real, and it's a factor that we have to look at. So it's not to say that there's a right or a wrong answer. It's to say that we've been able to bring people from different perspectives together to have really, I think, informed and interesting conversations. While we all share the same goal, we don't all share the same perspective.
And I should have said this earlier, but obviously, Seattle, Austin, many of our pilot cities also are undergoing remarkable turmoil in the streets. There's just it's an extraordinarily complicated time. It's a remarkably complicated time to be engaging elected officials, for a variety of reasons. But just in terms of, a lot of the dynamics. I mean, part of what I think is interesting, both about Seattle and Seattle slash King County and Austin, which I think is really, part of the big lesson for cities that are not Seattle or Austin is not that you should try to be them, but there are some takeaways in terms of long-term investment in these relationships and in acknowledging that music is not to be taken for granted and that music has to be somehow elevated, which is a big chasm between like, what does that look like in practice? Because again, with the music community being as complicated and as our communications infrastructure and all the changes as we've seen the evolution of the digital marketplaces, that's been super complicated. It's not like it's super clear to say, here's the 5-point plan that we want Seattle to do, but it is having that commitment of having that collaborative infrastructure and the liaison and the sort of connection points to say, well, we want to be at the table and we'll figure out what that means. And so it's really meaningful. Again, in previous conversations, we've highlighted Dow Constantine and the King County Executive and obviously our Music Policy Forum board member, Kate Becker, and the fact that King County is one of very few jurisdictions, in the United States that did put relief money from county funds, not federal funds, county funds towards, venue relief, even though the amount of the investment was not enough to feel like it was solving the problem or engaging with it in a meaningful way as possible. It was a clear demonstration of commitment from the city, which then makes it easier, I would hope, for then the music community when they're saying, we're at the table with Kate and with Scott and with their bosses and with others, to feel like this is a real conversation. And we are on the same team and we're trying to kind of engage in this stuff together. So that's been super interesting. And could you speak real quick, Dena? So just from a process standpoint, so you started with, kind of an open call, to people who would be interested in this work. And again, because of existing infrastructure, there's a general sense of who might be interested in being at the table and sort of a real intention around not trying to be a club, not trying to be a clique, but trying to be like, okay, who, let's make sure that people we may not know who they are, but should be at the table, feel like they're welcome at the table. And then that started in some sort of larger conversations that then have narrowed. And so you've done a weekly model, is that right?
Yeah, we've only had 6 meetings. I feel like we've gotten a lot. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground for 6 one-hour meetings, but there's work that happens between, I guess, as part of it. But yeah, first of all, thank you for mentioning the county's money. That's something I definitely should have acknowledged early on. It's such an important part of this conversation because even though it's not a lot of money, I think it was $75,000, it's putting your money where your talk is. It's showing the community this matters to us. And, there's a million competing issues, and we'll talk more about that later, I think. But to be able to say, no, we carved out some money just for you because we see you, we care about you, and we want you to survive. So I think, even if it was $10, I think it matters a lot that there is a place in the budget. We all know it's almost cliche to say it, but a budget is a moral document. It represents your values. And so I think it's really powerful that our county was able to do that. To go back to your question about the process, yeah, so the first meeting was really just let's all meet each other and understand who's at the table and what we're trying to do. And then the second meeting, we asked people to come with what they would identify as their top concern, or not necessarily top, but share with us, what are you concerned about? What do you want to spend our time on? What's most important to you? What do you feel least prepared to respond to? And then based on that feedback, we then created sort of 3 streams of conversations. One that was focused really on communications and marketing, which is like, how do we present ourselves to everybody, to policymakers, to the ticket buying public, to musicians? How do we talk about what's going on? The second stream was really more specific to the people, primarily the artists and the venue workers. So really looking at how do we hold these people up, keep them where they are, not lose everybody. And then the third stream was really about, for lack of a better term, what we're calling business models. And I want to refer back to something that you said, Bobby, earlier about, we don't expect music to be delivered the way it was for a long time. And that's kind of where this conversation has led us, is that we're recognizing, the national organization that came together, NEVA, has done a really nice job of putting together resources for venues. We have a Washington Association of Nightlife and Music called WANMA is the short name. And they've also done a nice job of putting together, like, when we reopen, make sure you have this in hand and everyone wears masks and all the, we sort of know what that stuff is. Not that it's a done deal forever, but we have a pretty big idea of what the big pieces are. So what we started to really focus on with that last stream is, okay, so what are some other ways of presenting music? Understanding that we're not going to reopen in the way that we've operated for the last 15 or 20 years. We're going to reopen in an altered reality. There will be limitations on capacity. There will be limitations on how music is presented, but we know that it's really important and that we can't lose live music. So let's talk about what are some other ways to do that. Are there different ways to present music to the public, to negotiate costs and revenue flows so that businesses can stay afloat? And so, I don't know that we're going to have any silver bullets or grand solutions, but I think it's been incredibly constructive to facilitate that discussion, as I said earlier, among various stakeholders. Everybody has a different perspective in the music ecosystem. And so having a place where people can come together safely and talk about, well, what if we did more of this? And someone else says, that's a terrible idea, where we can really just kind of hash through. We know we're not going to reopen venues anytime soon, but we want to be ready so that when it is safe to reopen, we can start right away.